everyone. I am Christy Oliver, the Professional Development Manager at Davis Publications. I am so excited to have a wonderful panel of artists here with us today to talk about preserving and reigniting our creative spark. To facilitate our session today, we have James Reese. James has been an art educator for a very long time, has worked in the field, and currently serves as a commissioner at large on the National Art Education Association's Research Commission. He's also served on the NAEA board as vice president and as the secondary division director. He's also currently an educational consultant with Davis Publications. We're thrilled to have James with us today, and without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to James.
Right. Thank you, Christy. I'm so happy to be here, and especially with a group of friends and artists that we have a very important topic that I think will resonate with you, the importance of creative renewal. And as the summer is underway and we're all trying to gear up and get ready for the upcoming school year, it's great for us to spend some time to connect with our own creative process. And these things help us to be more authentic, passionate, enthusiastic, and empathetic and understanding with our students. So, all right, so the session overview today with our artists, our fabulous creative artists, Katrina Berg, Emily Fox, and Kwani Winder. We're going to have a discussion, and they're going to introduce themselves in just a minute and talk a lot about their work. And then we're going to have a discussion at the conclusion where we share strategies for reviving your own creative spark and the importance of the creative practice as it relates to teachers. So working as an artist, I've always felt is an important thing for me as a teacher of 30 years. It helps me in my ability, and I believe this is true of all teachers, in teaching in the classroom. So we will have some thoughts about the value of keeping your creative spark alive, overcoming the creative barriers, because we all have them. And then we'll all, our great panel of professional artists that juggle life and do art, as you're all juggling teaching with art making, and they'll have some sound advice and tips. So with that, I'll introduce, Katrina will introduce herself, and we're going to get to know our artists.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katrina Berg. I'm coming to you today from Midway, Utah, up in the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains, and I'm excited to be with you. So my artwork is a lot of oil paintings, obviously, but specifically candy colored oil. I love to use thick paint that shines like stained glass. I also love to use symbolism in my work. I paint a lot of florals, but also still life, animals, just anything under the sun. But I'm excited to be with you today. I feel like the biggest thing that I just want to tell you is thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for all that you do, because it makes such a difference in this world that we live in. And we all just need everything that you have to give. So again, I just want to start by saying thank you. And I know that for me personally, that when I am struggling creatively, it's generally because I'm overwhelmed and I'm trying to do too many things. And if I know anything about you, and as artists and teachers, we tend to be doers. And so it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So I thought today that I would share just a little bit about just some personal examples of what I faced when I was just getting started. And I'm hoping that maybe you'll relate to some of these things, or you'll be able to think about what might be just kind of like strategically strangling you. And so you're feeling this overwhelm and not the ability to create. And then more importantly, I'm going to give you some strategies that have worked for me, but I'm hoping that the most powerful strategy that you'll find is the one that you hear as I'm talking, something that I can't specifically tell you, but something that your heart is going to tell you today. So just to back up a little bit, about 10 years ago, kind of at the beginning of my artist journey, I was loving creating. I was participating in quite a few like local things. I was just getting started. We had a beautiful organization that just a small group of artists, we created like an online art gallery, and it was so much fun. And it would never felt like a burden. But then we were also we wanted to get our own home. We were renting. We had 3 kids, ages 5, 3, and 2, and life was busy. And we just wanted to create this perfect place for our family. And so we thought, oh, I'll just start doing more, taking more teaching teaching jobs and it'll be wonderful. We'll be able to save up more so that we can build our home. Well, I was teaching French and I was teaching art out of the home and I was teaching art at the kids' schools. I didn't really have enough time to create with my kids, let alone have enough time to really create my own work. And so what I did was I looked at everything that I was doing and I thought, you know what, for this time in my life, I need to stop teaching. And that was a hard choice. And I'm not telling you to stop teaching today, but I do know that that is something that a lot of teachers are feeling right now. They're not even sure if they can go on. And so I hope that as you listen, that you'll be able to figure out maybe you're doing too many teaching things like I am, but I don't know. So I decided that I needed to stop. So then I was feeling a little bit better, getting more into my groove. I started preparing for like a really big art festival here locally. And I just wasn't feeling right. And then I found out just a little bit, like maybe a week or two later, that I was miscarrying our fourth child. And that was so hard. And it was kind of like a whole journey into secondary infertility. And I think that that is something that many of us face as teachers, whether it's our own children that we're struggling, bringing into this world, or maybe students that you have that you're worried about. And I know that this really affects your creativity. So we started building our home. We were living in the basement of my mother-in-law's home so that we could continue to do our thing. And I wasn't creating. And it was so difficult. I felt like I was kind of in this, maybe a little bit of a dark time creatively, but I did all that I could. I tried to find other ways to create. So I painted the walls in our house that we were building. I really tried to use the creativity with the food that I was making every day with my kids and for our family. And that definitely helped. But I feel like I also tapped into this need that I needed to focus on my own mental health, and that I wasn't going to be able to really jump back into it if my mental health wasn't in the proper place. So these were things that I was thinking about as I was going through all these. So as I was experiencing all this, I realized that, you know what? Challenges are always going to come our way. We're always going to have these times in our lives when as much as we try to let go of so many things, we can't let go of everything. So there's going to be these intense times. So I found myself saying, okay, there's always going to be challenges, but what can I do? What are the constant things that I absolutely need to have in my life, and what can I let go of? And so this would be the first thing that I would invite you to do, is ask yourself, what are your constants? What's your foundation that helps you create freely and helps you be able to face those challenges that are just coming constantly, right? So that would be the first thing. So for me personally, my constants are definitely spending time with my husband and my kids, being able to make sure that I'm creating regularly, make sure that I'm living healthy. So, spiritually, mentally, physically, all of those things, those are my constants. And when I feel like I can do those and those are in check, then I feel like I can kind of take on other things. So that would be the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would invite you to look at is, are you feeling overwhelmed because you're trying to not only do it all, but do it perfectly? And I think that's something that many of us struggle with. And so I would just invite us to really look at the perfectionism in our life. And instead of doing it all, we can do it all. Instead of like 100%, we can do it at like 85%. And I feel like when we do that, it just makes it so much easier to just let go of the things that really don't matter, right? So one thing that I noticed is that when I am creating, if I create in a series, it takes me about 10 to 15, before I feel like I'm getting into the groove. And so instead of getting frustrated because I feel like I'm not getting where I want with just a few, then I know it's going to take a little bit longer, right? So then the next thing I would say is giving up. And I kind of talked about this a little bit with my personal part, but for me, I feel like I'm always asking myself, what can I give up? Because I just want to focus on those constant things, the foundational things in my life, but what can I give up and what are my priorities? So for me, I know it sounds horrible, but there's been I kind of became a hermit the last few years and I love it. It's like the dreamiest dream ever, right? To just be, and for you, maybe it's being a teacher and going home to your studio space and doing your thing. But for me, I had to kind of give up lots of things. I gave up lots of lunch dates. I gave up the shoulds. all the shoulds that we think we should be doing, like volunteering specific places. And then also making those over the top birthday parties for my kids and loved ones, celebrating all the anniversaries. And I'm going to say the word Pinterest, like trying to just let go of the Pinterest things. And these are things that worked for me. And I'm sure you'll have specific things that work for you. But for me, those were the things that I had to, quote, give up so that I could really focus on the important things. The next thing that I would invite you to do is ask yourself, where can I get help? Because a lot of times there is help around us and we just need to ask. And so for me, it was teaching my kids to cook, teach them how to do their own laundry, how to clean the home so that I don't have to be there doing all the things, that we can do it as a team. And so I don't know how that would specifically help for you personally, but I know that as you think about it, you'll know exactly how you can get a little bit more help. A lot of times it's something that that somebody else can do without you, but maybe the perfectionism is like, oh, if I do it myself, it'll be done better. It'll take less time. And so for me, I found that even though it took time to teach my kids how to do laundry when they were in kindergarten, it's like benefited me so much more lately. And then the last thing, and I would say, is to reevaluate regularly. So I told you about some stuff that happened 10 years ago, but if I look back, it's constant. It's something that I have to just step back and look at all the time. What is too much in my life? What can I give up? What can I do so that I can focus on those priorities? And then just to remind myself, people always say, how do you do it all? Well, I don't do it all. And isn't it nice to be able to say, you know what? I don't do it all, but I carefully choose and prioritize. And that way I have plenty of time and energy to do the things that I really want most, which is to spend time with my family and to have that creative energy left over. For me, I found that one of the ways that I do that is just making a schedule, scheduling studio time, having a plan, and just going for it, not apologizing, just being very grateful for all the time that I have, even though I may not be able to do everything that I would like to do. Just be okay with that and keep moving forward, because I feel like the journey is like the most important part. So again, I just want to thank you for being you, and thank you for all that you do. I wish that we could be doing this in a way that we could actually interact and hear what your specific, things are that you struggle with. But I just want you to know that you're not the only one, that all 5 of us here are here to support you, and we will be sending the best vibes to each of you. And as I close, I would just let you know that I do have a podcast, and I do talk about some of these things on my podcast. So if you ever just want to listen to somebody that gets where you're at, it's the Candy Colored Studio. You can also just search up my name in any of your podcast places and you'll find it. So thank you again, and much love to each of you.
Okay, my name is Emily Fox King, and I'm excited to be here. Katrina just gave a wonderful presentation. It's a tough act to follow. I work as a professional artist. I've also taught at the university level for quite a while. I've worked in museum education, and I love to make stuff. And I wanted to take you on my journey a little bit. If we go to my first slide, I wanted to back up and start with my school days. I was 18 and I was going to change the world with art. And I was very interested, I still am, but I was very interested in feminism, and I was going to change the single-handedly unpeel back the layers of all the BS and the bad hand that women had been dealt. And so I was making these epic pieces. And then if we go further, I continued school, and I went to graduate school, and I made like a diorama, like this IKEA house thing you can walk into, and it was just epic, and it was heavy, and it was loaded with irony and meaning. And then when the show was over, it all pretty much ended up in the garbage. And so it was interesting for me, like, what am I doing this for? If we go to the next slide, then I finished school, and then kind of came out flying, and then it was like, oh, flap your wings and just fall down, because I didn't have any support anymore. My funds dried up, right? I had to get a job to pay for my art practice. And then the work I was interested in making, it's the kind of stuff that just goes in the garbage. So I wasn't super happy because I wasn't creating and I didn't really know where to go. So then I found florals, and I found it was a wonderful mix of, like, I'm a workhorse. I love to just make stuff. And I was like, I can make florals, and I have an audience for them. And this will feed me. I had small kids and I felt like I was choking all the time, kind of what Katrina touched on. I wasn't working and making stuff and nurturing that part of me. And so I was really struggling a lot. So I found the florals that kind of saved my life. It wasn't as heavy as some of the other work I wanted to make, but if we go to the next slide, I love the process, and I just like to be busy making stuff. It's kind of like some of you like to work out. It's kind of like, I just need that head change. I need to be making stuff in order for me to work and function. And I think that's what draws all of us to art and to art education, is the need to create. So now that I work and paint full time as my job, I can totally dread it, and I don't want to do the work. I get tired of painting flowers. And so I like to do small assignments that are manageable. And I have this metaphor. I like to exercise with these ladies, and we exercise early in the morning, and we always run this loop around the block, and you just have to start shuffling. And I think it works with art as well. If you think you have to make a masterpiece every time you go out there to make stuff, it's probably not going to be very fun and not turn out very well. So I like to change my subject matter too. So sometimes I do a bunch of landscapes, and I don't sell a lot of them, but I sure have a good time making them. And then I think about what should you make, the thing that lights you up and the thing that sounds fun. And if you know the book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, she talks about think delight, do not think duty. And I'm pretty practical. And so I want, and I love to make money. Let's just be real. So I want to make stuff that I can sell, but creativity doesn't really work that way. So we have to be feeding our spirit, soul, and improving our craft. And then, like, if people want to buy it, great. Or if people want to look at it, even great. And I think it's important to make work that works with your life. And so I just threw an example here. This is my son. I'm not even a portrait painter, and he doesn't really look like that, but I had a great time making that. And it's just part of my weekly painting practice to stay creating. And then during the pandemic, I did these doll houses because we were all stuck at home, and kind of this idealized vision of a dollhouse. And it sounded great to be stuck at home, but then in the reality of it, everyone was, they were kind of driving me nuts, and it was a different story, but the painting helped me through that. So if we go to the next slide, painting your problems away. I kind of stuff, I know they're like floral paintings, and they're decorative, and they go hang in your house and just make your house look pretty. But I guarantee I have shoved like all my problems inside of them. And especially with your family, you can't name names and be like, oh, my husband is so terrible. And like, I'm not going to call everybody out, but I shove it in the painting, and then it works for me. So I think finding a process that works for you and helps you get through your life, and you creating the work that you want to make, I think that's really, really important. If we go to the next slide. And then I think the title can help clue people in. Just some of my titles. This one on the left, it's family. It's messy and it's chaotic, but it's totally beautiful because, right, our families are awesome, but they're difficult. Resting bitch face. It's just an unhappy term. It's not fair. And it's a beautiful painting. She's a great lady. And then the truth about belly fat. I was thinking about those magazines when the headlines when you're in the grocery aisle. And the truth about belly fat is it's not going anywhere, and it's a beautiful thing. So I wanted to put my own spin on that. So I don't know that I'm making these big feminists or changing the world through art, but it's changing my life and it's keeping me alive, and I'm not choking anymore in the other duties and the other aspects of my life. And so I just wanted to share that your artist practice can help you stay grounded in yourself and in the things that you need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Emily segues great into kind of what I wanted to share with you. I'm Kwani Povey Winder. I am a Native American from the Santa Clara Pueblo tribe, and I wasn't always going to be an artist. I kind of had a big journey to get to where I was as an artist, and I grew up in Idaho, Southeast Idaho. I currently live in North Ogden, Utah, but I'm actually building a home back up in Idaho. So I'm going to be going back to where I grew up. And I went to school at BYU, Idaho. And the interesting thing about me is that I didn't ever think art could be a career. And I had other interests. I loved biology, and that's what I pursued in college. And it wasn't until I was almost graduated with my biology degree that I switched to art. In my art, I have used it as a self-exploration. And that has come in the 10 years since I graduated college with my BFA. I did not set out to be a native artist, figurative painter. I wanted to do a lot of plein air, and I still do a lot of plein air. But it's been interesting as I have kind of become more aware of myself and more aware of my art and my style. It's kind of just found me, and it's brought all these things together in me. These are self-portraits that unintentional, I guess. I don't set out to be like, this is me, but I do paint myself. I tell people I paint myself because I'm free, cheap, and easy. But I also use it as a way to kind of explore me, because my native identity, growing up with a father who was white and a mother who was native, and not even growing up in the same state as our tribe, it still has me trying to figure that out. And art has been a way for me to explore that. And so the painting on the left is called She Who Remembers, and it's a nod to where my name came from. Kwani comes from a book called She Who Remembers, and it's about a Pueblo girl who is very unique. And my parents, because my mother was very old when she had me, they were worried that I would have things wrong with me, or that they were encouraged actually to terminate my pregnancy because they weren't sure that it would be the best thing for my mom. And as I've sat and been able to paint and these different paintings, so She Who Remembers just is a nod to myself, and to always remember where I started, and that my namesake in this book is about this Pueblo girl that goes on to do these incredible things and remembers her nation, and she represents her people. The painting in the middle was the first time that I got to dance since I was a young girl. And that was really special to me, because it was the first time that I kind of reconnected with my native side. And then the painting on the right is called First Dance, and that was actually the first time that I danced. And I'm dressed as a buffalo dancer in that painting. In my art career, I've had a wonderful opportunity to meet other people and to connect with other people. And this is Bree Blackhorse. She is an incredible person. She's a lawyer, but she was kind of the first person that allowed me to get to know her and to get to represent her. And something I strive to do in my portrait paintings is to really represent the people, and represent not only, oh, look, they have beautiful regalia, but let's go deeper, and let's explore and get to know the person and try to represent themselves and showcase them, and not just the clothes that they're wearing. This is my visit to the past. So these are different Pueblo ruins that I've been able to go to. When I paint, I try really hard to draw upon my life and my experiences and the emotions that are there. This is called Abide the Storm. On the left-hand side, that big blue sky, and these ruins have been there since the 1800s or even the 1700s. And they have weathered the places. And I use these paintings as a way to kind of, as others have mentioned, it's kind of therapy to process some of the things that I've gone through or that I'm struggling with. My art has allowed me to given me excuses to go to beautiful places. So I hope that, like, as you go to these places, that you are always drawing and sketching. That would be one of my greatest tips is anytime I'm driving in the car, I'm constantly looking at the sky and looking at the scenery around me and thinking, how would I paint that? If I took a photo, like, why does that landscape make me pause? And I try to create, even when I'm not creating. I'm in a moment right now where my life is balance is taking me to focus on other areas. And I actually haven't been able to sit down and paint for a couple months. And that just happens. And it's okay to let it happen, because balance doesn't mean that it's always the same. Sometimes it means your art takes a little bit more and maybe some of your other things go the other way. And sometimes it means your family takes a little bit more and your art goes down, or maybe your family and your art go up and some other things drop down. And that can swing and that can change, and it's very fluid. And that's one great thing that I've learned as an artist, is to allow myself to ebb and flow as I connect with my art. I don't know about you, but with the pandemic and things shutting down, my heart was really, really heavy. And I had a hard time creating because I felt like I was sucked dry and I had nothing to give. And I'm sure that that happens, and it has happened to me at other points, but it was very evident with COVID and everything and the political turmoil that went on. But in the middle of all of that, I had the opportunity to paint this painting. It's called Alive in Me. And 23andMe, the DNA company, reached out to me, and for their Native American Heritage Month, they wanted me to create a piece that was kind of 3 parts that they could share in 3 parts. And it was so special to me to have this opportunity, because they asked me to give them a bid of how much it would cost to create a piece like this. So I gave them my bid, and they came back to me and they said, actually, we're going to pay you more. And it was amazing what it did to me. And I would encourage you, when you feel like your art is valued and what you're doing, don't undervalue yourself. Don't make it feel like it's a chore. Make it feel like it's a joy. And if that means you need to be working on things more or not getting paid or getting paid more, when they did that, I had a plan of what I was going to do. And once they said, I'm going to pay you more, that freed me to just explore and just feel like this is covered. I can spend as much time as I want on this. And this is the result. And this is an incredible painting that marries the dancers from my village, scenes from my village, scenes from our pueblo. Myself and my daughters are represented in this painting. And then my grandfather and my mother and my sister are represented on the other side. And it just is all of these things that are alive in me. And I really used art to kind of explore that, because it has not always been easy to be kind of not native enough for the natives, but not white enough for the whites, and just kind of in this bridge place. And I really enjoy being in this bridge place, but it's also a really hard place to be, because you don't quite have both feet in any place. It's an uncomfortable place to be. But I encourage you to use your art to become uncomfortable, to become exploring your identity, explore your past, your present, your future, what you want to do. I find a lot of inspiration. And when I went back to my roots during the pandemic and I started painting a lot more landscapes and I stepped away from figures, it was healing to me, because I went back to what I started with and what I loved and what was familiar. instead of always trying to push the envelope and push my emotions. This final slide of mine represents the 3 paintings that were kind of in the moments that changed my trajectory as an artist. And they're spiritual pieces. And I do some spiritual pieces, not all the time. They take a lot out of me, so they kind of come few and far in between. But these represent those moments where I brought my religion, which is very important to me, my religion together with my Native heritage, together with my ability, together with the emotions that I wanted to portray. And these paintings represent when all of that coalesced together. And as others mentioned, that you cannot sustain that being a masterpiece all the time. You have to have think of like a musical or a music, just even a song. You have those moments in the song that are the climaxes, but then you also have the chorus and the familiar parts that kind of get you through and support the other areas. And so these are definitely those climax moments for me. But the things that sustain me are the little pieces that took me to this and that prepared me for this and helped me get my brushwork underneath me. So just be creating, just even if you can't put pen to paper, brush to canvas, just be looking for creative things, appreciating the beautiful moments.
Thank you, Kwani. Really great advice, and I'll try to live up to their high level that they just set, the bar, with the advice they gave. Many of you know me in the realms of art education, but concurrently, I've always really worked hard to maintain my studio practice. And I know that that can be a struggle. And so as I share my artwork, I will share some tips that have helped me to be able to balance those 2 different worlds. One of which is having a physical space somewhere dedicated that you can. It can be a table, a kitchen table, it can be a wall, easel, whatever is part of the things that have helped me to maintain my studio practice. So these images are, I'm a monotype printer, my MFAs in printmaking, and these are smaller images, 11 by 15. And in this series, I've been pulled out the last few years. It came out a little bit before COVID, that I was struggling and working through issues, as some of our artists have shared, that art can often be cathartic in helping us to figure things out in our life and share that journey with others. This is a representation of some of the struggles that I've had in my life. And I was doing this in my sketchbook, and I realized, you know what? I should be more vulnerable and share some of the journeys and thoughts that I have, and hopefully it will connect and resonate with others. So I found that it has, and I've been maintaining this series for the last several years. One of the things that I do, and I find a challenge as an art educator, is often we see various styles, right? And we're teaching our students and exposing them to various artists and hoping they find their own voice. Well, I found that in my work, I have different voices depending upon the scale and the idea behind what I say. Here is a series of 30 by 22 prints, monotype prints that are more metaphoric representation of different things in my life journey. And these are images I tend to sell and display in museums and in other contexts. The other work that I share tend to connect with people on a personal level, and I've made them affordable so everyone can own an original hand-pulled monotype print and have that part of their collection. So this is a series that's been ongoing and continues to be so, and just deals with more layering and metaphors at a bigger scale. One of the things that I recommend that I should probably mention is you find your groove and your rhythm, finding your time in a weekly schedule to find time to do work. It's just finding that rhythm. We all have them, and Emily talked about exercising every morning. One thing I do is between teaching And coming into the studio, I buffer my practice as an artist by doing exercise. I mountain bike, and some of you may have heard that before, but I think it's important to buffer. Here is a series of oil paintings that I did upon the death of my mother. And my mother struggled with OCD, and this was my reaction and response to cleaning up and running through the endless boxes that she left, the debris of her life. And I realized in this series that, you know, we can choose to focus on the clutter of people around us, or we can also see past that and find beautiful patterns that emerge when we focus and look at that aspect, that everyone has something beautiful in their life. And often it looks chaotic from a distance, but as we zoom in, we can start to see beautiful patterns emerge. So this oil series paintings was a tribute to my mother and looking at the beautiful things in her life, seeing past the chaos of her OCD and hoarding. I have an ongoing larger series these are 60 by 29 inches. And they're large monotype prints, transferring drawings where I'm dealing with more figurative subjects. And the one on the left is in a show about death. And the other one on the right is a more personal subject about seeing and obscurity and looking past. So it's fun to play with different mediums and scales and explore different work in different contexts, as just as we have our students explore things and their voices in different ways can be amplified by the scale and the different medias that we use. So one thing I wanted to recommend, one thing that has kept my creative practice going is keeping a sketchbook. I have my students do that. I feel it is inherently worthwhile for me to not curate what I do in my sketchbook. I just think out loud and I put it all there. And if someone's looking over my shoulder, they may not like always what they see, but that's okay. It's me processing things. And often these things become the basis of paintings down the road or prints and whatever. But I encourage you to keep a sketchbook. The nice thing about a sketchbook, you can carry it wherever you have down moments. Heaven knows, as educators, you have a lot of meetings you go to that are not all that interesting. Well, turn inward and express things in your sketchbook, and you'll feel these meetings suddenly take on better value for you personally. So, and one thing I would say, the nice thing about a sketchbook is something you can also carry over the practice of making and then curating and analyzing afterwards. Don't censor yourself before you start the creative process. I think often we can have that voice in our head where we stop making because that teacher voice in our head says, you know what, that's not going to be any good. You're wasting your time. In the sketchbook, I don't even have that voice available. I just make and just fill up tons of sketchbooks. And then later I go through them to find ideas for prints and paintings. So I encourage you to keep a sketchbook. Also, don't keep yourself from expressing. Don't put value on things before you start making them. You can do that afterwards. So here's the most interesting, and I'm excited for this conversation. Some of the advice that I'd love for our artists to share with you is, number one, if some of our teachers haven't been engaged in the creative practice, because we all know teaching drains you, right? It's time consuming, but emotionally it's draining. What are some things that you would recommend that people can do to get that creative spark rekindled, or not allow it to dwindle or extinguish completely?
I can speak to that. I think you kind of sneak into it, and whatever sounds interesting and delightful, like you go there. And I liked that you brought up your sketchbooks, James, because it may not make a lot of sense, and it might be kind of embarrassing that you're interested in this creating work about something, but that it's kind of this gut, like that's where you need to go. And then my other bit is that keep it short. Like I really like a measurable, maybe a 30-minute project, something I could complete in one session. so that I just feel good. I pat myself on the back, like I did it. And then I can move on with my life. And the more I do these shorter things, maybe eventually it will grow into a more thought out project or more time, but starting small and starting with what feels joyous to you.
Great advice.
Second that, and times that I've had, it's like pulling teeth trying to get something going creatively. If I just step away and I let myself go from like that expectation of this needs to be a masterpiece or this needs to look like this, and I just let myself, I mean, I made a live, laugh, and love sign and painted a lily. And that brought me joy in that moment. And it set me up to eventually change my major and become an artist. But it, you know, if I wasn't willing to make something that wasn't a masterpiece, then I would have missed out. And I think also divorcing yourself, it's hard to make that jump from not having an assignment of like, this is I have to like you kindling it yourself. That can be a struggle. But again, I think if you just follow your heart and just do small things, little things, even if it's just doodles on a paper, like that can be edifying and set you up for bigger things, or, you know, get you in the groove to do more things.
Yeah. So we're talking about doing small things, and I think that's so valuable. And for me, I think I also just need to commit. So I tell myself, okay, I'm going to do like along the small theme, I'm going to do some small studies, or I'm going to do just a small series, and I'm going to just pick something that, whether it's each day, something that brings you joy that, you know, some of the ladies have already talked about. Like maybe I say, I'm finding a lot of joy in cooking right now. So I remember I did a little series of little KitchenAid mixers, right? And so I did like a whole bunch of those, and they were just small, so it didn't take very long, but it just kind of helped me get going. And then you could do, you know, I think there's something about doing a series. So, you know, whether it's you just choose a subject or a style, you could even piggyback off someone else. You know, maybe you really loved the way that somebody on Instagram did something, take your own spin on it and tell yourself, I'm going to do 12 of these, and I'm going to spend the next, you know, I'm going to sit down every day and work on one of these until I finish and see how that goes. And then the other thing that really helps me is with the commitment is just to like have a place to like have an event or a place to take those things. Now, it doesn't have to be a huge commitment. Maybe you're doing a local market. Maybe you're going to like a family event and you just want to take those and give them as little gifts for like Christmas or something like that. Just have an event or something that you're working towards. Like I said, it can be a personal thing within, you know, people that you trust, and you're not going to be embarrassed to share these new sparks with them. Or it could be even a little bit bolder, like I'm going to do this art market, I'm going to do this event, and I'm going to bring this little series with me. And I think that would be really great. Also, just being, you know, share with your students, say, I'm going to commit to, I'm going to do these small little things, but I'm going to share with my students each day, each time I commit, after I complete one of these little things, I'm going to share it with them. I'm going to tell them what I learned and what I liked about it, what I didn't, and just be really honest with yourself and others. And I think that when you include others in your, I don't know, your creative process, it will just help with your commitment and just help you keep going, because they'll support you. Really, the people in your life are going to support you. Even if you think it's horrible, they're going to love that you're doing it, and they're going to love that you're getting back into it. So
Great advice. So that brings us up to the next area. And I think there's some connection about as teachers, we're overly structured sometimes. And, you know, we have assignments, right? And we have deadlines and that. I think is when you're doing your own art, you have to kind of transition and be comfortable with ambiguity, right? And play and let things happen. And this brings me to this slide, which is really interesting. I don't know if any of you listen to podcasts, but I love podcasts, and I'm kind of a geek. I listen to a wide range of things, but the Huberman Lab, if he's out of Berkeley, or is he Stanford? Anyway, I think he's Stanford. He talks about, this is how you break down, this is how creativity is seen. And I really have found this is true. Step one is we're very divergent thinking. We often call that brainstorming and whatnot. We let anything go, right? I talked about that being in my sketchbook. And then we curate what we come up with to say, you know what, all these ideas are not great. These, though, have value and are unique. And so I'm just curious, you know, as we embrace failure, that's part of it, and be vulnerable. What are some things you do to brainstorm? Where do you get your ideas? Where would you recommend that some of our teachers explore to keep, you know, keeping their imagination into focus and be able to play and find ideas that are valuable to them?
A lot of my paintings are emotion based. And so I think of nostalgic moments, you know, like revisiting different things. I have a bajillion photos on my phone from when we're traveling, and I'm just take a picture real quick while we're driving or doing things. And I had an opportunity to kind of go back through them and relive those moments and pick out and curate, you know, so gather all of these photos together. And then I just went through and kind of curated, and from that pulled some references to have a solo show of just these moments that were, but it was really, really interesting and beautiful to me, because some of these places I had traveled to specifically to take pictures for reference photos, but some of these places I was just on my way home from the grocery store, and I saw a beautiful rainbow, so I pulled over. And so I think a lot of it is just taking it from landscapes or places I've been, and then just curating it down to, you know, these ones really resonate with me right now. And it's always fascinating to me when I go back through reference material of like what I pulled out to paint at one point, and then I come back to it with a different frame, a different place of life, and something else resonates with me. And so I think always just having those, again, just being open to gathering and then creating moments where you can gather big and then gather small and find a direction.
Anyone else?
Sure, I'll add something. So I feel like sometimes I love the whole sketchbook thing, but for me, sometimes I just have to do it. And I know that sounds horrible, because I feel like the sketchbook in a lot of ways is safer, but but if I don't actually create the work, even if it's just little pieces, then I can't do the radiating. I can't explore properly. So if you're like me, don't feel bad about like not being able to get as far as you want with the sketchbook. The sketchbook is that initial thought. And some of you, your sketchbooks are amazing. They look just like the real thing. But for me, I actually need to get in there and start doing it. And so I think part of it is just figuring out your process and figure out what works for you. And then the other thing that I was thinking of is that, you know, you've got all these little pieces of things that you're working on. And for me, sometimes it doesn't show up until a lot later. And I hate to say that, because I know a lot of times we want to see immediate results. I think especially those of us that teach or have that, we're really, we like to see things actually happen. And sometimes it's good to just be patient with yourself, because for me, I think for me, like the style took a long time because I just had to keep making. And then after I made so many paintings, it was like nothing, I couldn't let anything come out that wasn't my own language or my own style, but it took a long time. And so I think just being patient with yourself as you're trying to figure out what are the good things, what's the good ideas that are coming out of here. Just be patient, I guess.
Good advice.
That's something that I do a lot. And I don't allow myself to just, I'm known for this kind of art, but I allow myself to paint succulents and other things that make me happy, because that's what gets me creative and that's what gets me practice and that's what I enjoy. So I let myself do it because I enjoy it. I don't just say, oh, I'm only going to paint this one thing. I'm also a really bad sketchbook keeper, but I do sketch in my head and think about things a lot. So sometimes it doesn't always end up translating into paper, but I think the important thing is to develop ideas and to kind of collect them and think about them and process them in some way.
Great. This may be a good transition to the next slide. An idea is that every artist works in their own way. And you will have your own way of working. I think you need to trust your gut. You need to value the way you're doing things, and your intuitive approach is what you should do. Something Katrina said a little bit ago that will help you is, and it seems weird, but if you have a support group that helps you find your individual voice, it's kind of like what you do for your students, right? As a teacher, you're helping them to find their voice. So it's important for you to find a group of people that will support you. Maybe you have a group of friends that you meet for a gathering each month or whatever. You need to find people that are in your corner that will support your creative endeavors. So this is a quote I love. It's by Martha Graham. We all know her for her dance. If you don't, you need to look her up, the mother of modern dance. But I really like this because it's been reiterated by all of our artists. You know, you need to do you. And there's something unique that you have to offer, a unique view. And it will be different than someone else. It may be in some ways it's not as good as someone else. We'll forget about it. That's okay. Be yourself and be comfortable in your own skin and expressing the world around you through your own process. Any advice about finding your own individual voice? Because it is a challenge for teachers that we teach so many different students, and they all have their own different voice, and we're exposing them to a lifetime of artists worldwide. How do we help people how do people find their own way of doing things? I know that's a tough question. How did you find the way that you work and the subject that speaks to you? How did you talked a little bit about the subject matter? What about the process of working?
You're making me think of this book that I read. Oh shoot, I'm not pulling it up. But the first chapter is about like not knowing what your left hand, and keeping your hand, you're not knowing what, you're just like on a path, you don't know, you're not critiquing, you're not really aware of what you're doing, you're kind of just doing what feels good. And it's Natalie Goldberg, Writing Down the Bones. It's a book about writing.
Oh, Emily, I love you. That's so great. Yeah, I think the hardest thing is that, especially as teachers, you are expected to be perfect in, just like James said, all the artists, all the styles, but then you have to show people how to do it. And that it's easy to feel like you are mediocre in all the things, when you really just want to be able to share just your voice. And so I think that just being aware of that and just choose one for a while. It may not be what you think is going to be you, but pick something that you feel that feels authentic to you right then and go down that path. And then maybe a year later, your heart will tell you to kind of pivot and do something a little different. But I think that the best part of being an artist is the doing. And so we just have to be brave enough to go down, kind of like Emily said, do what feels good. You don't know where you're going. Just keep going down that path until you can't even help. There comes a point where you can't get off the path because you just can't help it. You just stay on that path and it will come. It'll totally come. This feels very Martha Graham, it just feels very out there. But I think that once you tap into it, it just starts to feel more concrete, and you just can't help but everything that comes out of you just fits in that realm, right? And I think it's really clear with James, Kwani, and Emily's work, each one of them, even though you're doing different subjects, I can tell that it's yours. And that's when you know that you've hit something, right? And so I would just say, keep going down that path until you feel you can't get off of it.
And I would say it's important. Here's a quote by Winston Churchill. We have to, and it really is about reframing our failures. Success consists of going from one failure to another without loss of enthusiasm. And I think that's true, right? Failure is a way we learn. And I think you'll find yourself, and it will resonate, like you were saying. You will feel it, like, oh, I'm home. This is natural expression of what I have inside me. And here's another quote that really just pushes that, is to lean forward. And this image I put is from my sketchbook, is we will figure it out by moving forward. And that's how we get balance, right? Through momentum. By doing, it will become evident. We don't sit and think, we do, and it becomes we become aware of that path, that where we should be working on and how we should be saying what we want to say through an art medium.
Yeah, I want to add, it just reminds me, we talked about exercise, and I have not always exercised, and but I do now, and I will be like, have you guys ever done a push-up? It's the worst view of your body. It's like sitting in you're like, what? Like, it just looks awful. I just see my stomach like bulging, and I start thinking negative things about my body and about myself and my fitness level. But I go, well, what the heck? I'm doing it. I'm doing the work. And so when you're making work, because you're just not going to make very good work at the beginning, especially if you're kind of rusty and you haven't been practicing, you may not be on your groove yet, and you're going to make some really stupid stuff. And I just want you to think about you're doing it. And kind of, that's the Winston Churchill quote. It's not time. You can't be judging the product. It's about being in the process.
I look at it as like, I have a musical background, and I look at it as when you're learning a song, you have to break it down into the parts. And sometimes you got to drill those parts over and over again, and you got to slow it down. But eventually you get to the point where you learn it, and then you can move on and you can bring all the pieces together and make a beautiful thing. But it takes sometimes some sitting in some ugly before you get to the beautiful.
And I will say, if you do keep a sketchbook, I do this with my students, it's a diagnostic tool. If you look at it objectively and through pages, you start to see certain things, themes and elements that emerge. For me, line is important. If you look at my work and if I look through my sketchbooks, it's like, well, line is important, duh. And then there'll be other subjects that emerge. If you do that for yourself, or even have someone look at your sketchbook, if you can't be, or your work, and see what commonalities they find, you sometimes can get that objective help by nudging, like, this is really clear. And so that can be another help to help you find the ways you want to work and that fit with who you are naturally. What is the last bit of advice you'd give for these teachers and I have the deepest respect for teachers, not only because I was one, because I worked with them, and I know how tremendously challenging it is, but I also know how it will enrich your own life and those that you teach if you can keep the creative spark alive in your work. So what last little snippet of advice would you give for them to stay on the creative path? I know you've given a lot of good advice.
I think that this is probably good advice for anything, but I would say gratitude. And I just feel like whenever I refocus on gratitude, whether it is gratitude for having the opportunity to share the things that I'm learning or to learn from others. And just, we talked a lot about little moments, writing down just one thing that you're really grateful for that day, whether it's in your art practice, whether it's a spark that you found in your creativity, whether it's a student that inspired you. I think that just making that part of our studio practice will just really help us just keep moving through those hard times. And yeah, just know that you're loved and you're not alone, because we all face this, in our various situations.
My advice would be to give yourself permission to have things look different at different times, have different balance and ebb and flow. Allow yourself to explore into an area that maybe makes you feel uncomfortable, but don't let go of the expectations of having to create a masterpiece, of having to do an artwork that will sell. Your work, when it resonates with you internally and you arrive at your style, that's when you arrive at your style and your voice. That's when it's most successful, and that's when it communicates and connects with other people, is when you connect with yourself and you're doing stuff for you and not for anybody else.
I feel like I have to add something, but you guys said it all. You totally did. So the thing that popped into my head was like the Nike slogan, just do it, just do the push-ups, do the sit-ups, do the work in a small, manageable way, and see where it takes you.
Yeah, and again, I think as teachers, we're too hard on ourselves sometimes, and we stop ourselves from making, because we can hear that voice that we maybe have inadvertently shared with some of our students. But you know, it's okay to make ugly things. I had an artist friend that says, you know what, it took me 2,000 paintings before I started making anything I thought was good. And so, you know, just dive in. It's okay to stumble through things. You'll figure it out.
Well, Kwani, Katrina, Emily, and James, thank you so, so much for sharing your time and expertise with us today. It was an incredibly inspiring session, and I really just so value you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want to just remind everyone who might be watching this webinar that Davis has a lot of free resources, including this fabulous webinar. We have more webinar recordings. We have complimentary professional development. We have lessons, videos. We have a podcast called K-12 Art Chat. We have adaptive art resources, ED&I resources, and of course, the wonderful School Arts magazine you can read online. And if you want to make sure that you stay up to date with all of the great things that Davis is doing, you can check us out on social media. And please definitely head over to davisart.com/free resources to see all of the wonderful things that we're doing. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.